Hi friends. So this week I'm going to show you a completely different way of working with Inkscape using AI. I guess like anything, you end up going into certain ecosystems. My AI ecosystem is Google based because the rest of my tools in my personal life are Google based. And so I use Gemini. And so I decided to use Gemini in order to create a poster with a natural background and the phrase, "May you have peace." I've worked with this idea in Gemini in the past, and it wasn't always very good at getting the text right in a poster that I create. But in this case, it did a very good job. But I'm still going to show you how to use AI generated images in your workflow with Inkscape. So let's go into Inkscape and play. Okay, so here we are in Inkscape. I'm going to import the image that I created using Gemini. And we've talked about this before. I'm going to embed it, and I'm going to leave the rest of these settings as they are. And it's a very large image. And so one thing I like to do is, if my page in Inkscape is not the same size as what I'm working in, I usually make the page the size of what I'm working in. So I'm going to go into Document Properties with that image selected. I'm going to go into Document Properties, and there's this Resize to Content. So with that image selected, I'm going to click that, and now my page is the same size in pixels as the image that I'm importing. If I hit 5 on my keyboard, of course it centers on the page. And I like this image a lot. It did a really good job. I like that it has Latin names of animals, and it did some research about what kinds of animals I might encounter in a forest near me. And the text that I asked it to create is correct. But let's say that it wasn't. Or better yet, let's say that I like everything about this except for this font. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover what they've written, what Gemini created in this image, by using my rectangle tool and making a rectangle about the size of that text. I'm going to change this into a path because as a rectangle, I can't bend or otherwise shape the edges of this rectangle, right? So I'm going to say path, object path, and then I'm going to go into my node tool, and I'm going to bring the corners to the edges of the text. And I'm going to bend the lines in between those nodes, all with the node tool. And I'm also going to set my opacity to 50% on this for a second, down here in opacity, so that I can see the text through my cover-up shape, like so. And I'm going to take this from 4 nodes to 5. I'm going to double click right there so that I can adjust that shape. Now, I'm happy with that. I'm going to set this back to 100. And I want this shape that I just created, this path, to be the same color as what it is on top of. And so I'm going to use the dropper tool, and I'm going to click around in that background and see the variety of colors. And what that leads me to think is that this should be a gradient. So I'm going to use the gradient tool, and I'm going to click and drag along that path, and I'm going to use the dropper tool and select that edge of the path, and I'm going to click on this edge of the path and choose a color from over there. And then finally, in order to blend that a little bit, I am going to blur that shape a little bit so that it blends in with the rest of it. So I'll click on Fill and Stroke, which brings up this dialog. I'm going to click into Fill and Stroke. And here under Fill, there is Blur and Opacity. So I could change opacity over here as I have, but I could also do it here. I'm going to blur this just a little bit. You can see it happen in real time as I increase the blur. Now I don't want the blur to occur so much that I can see the text behind it. So 14 is too much. Right around 8 seems to be a pretty sweet spot. And so here I've taken the image and covered up that text, but the gradient isn't quite working. So I'm going to go back into the gradient tool, and I'm going to add another node by double clicking on it just like I would in a path, and that can be set to a color as well. So if I go to the dropper and choose that, click on this node and choose that or this, I go to this node and choose this. I'm going to add a couple more nodes along this gradient, so I go back into the gradient tool. I'm going to click here or double click there. I'm going to double click here, go back to my dropper tool, select that node and choose a color. I'll select this node, choose this color. This is starting to be a little bit more believable as a cover-up for that text. And now I'm going to create some text. This is the first time that we have done this in this series, adding text to an illustration. So I'm going to click on the text tool, and I'm going to click here. I'm going to type in all caps, may all beings have peace. You can see that the font that I chose at its default is bigger than what I need it to be. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the far edge of that text. I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, and I'm going to downsize this so that it's about the right size. I'll hit 5 on my keyboard again. I'm going to scroll on my mouse and scroll in by holding down Control and scrolling in. And you can see that the text is the same color as one of the nodes in the gradient. So it becomes almost translucent in this with this background. I'm going to click on black in order to make that text black. Okay. And if you want to make any changes to this line of text, now is the time to do it, because if we decide to change this text into a path, it's no longer editable text. If I want to look through the fonts, for example, for this text, I can click on the Text and Font tool, which opens up the Text and Font dialog, and you can see that I have a preview of that text. If I click through, I can see the text that I am trying to create in all of the different fonts that I have on my system. So I like Liberation Sans. I'm going to apply that font to my text. I'm going to hold down Control and size this out again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a path that I can place this text on top of. And I'm going to curve that path so that the text follows that path. For this, I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to click and click again, and you can see that there's a line now. When I hit return on my keyboard and then go to the node tool, I can drag that path along. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit X on that path, and I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard and hit black on that path. And the reason for that is because I want to see the line of the path but not the fill of the path. And so if you, with no keyboard modifications, hit one of the colors, it changes the fill by default. But if you hold down Shift on your keyboard with an object selected and change the color, it will change the line color. So here I have this black path and the text ready to be set on that path. In order to make it a little bit more visible, I think I'm going to hold down Shift and hit red so that this path is red so that it stands out. Now, in order to place this text on this path, I select the text and then I hold down Shift and select the path so that both of those objects are selected. If you don't do that, this operation will not work. Now, I'm going to go to Text, and I'm going to choose Put on Path. If I choose Put on Path, but do not have both the text and the path selected, Inkscape won't know what I'm trying to do, and so it will not change anything. But because I have both of these objects selected, when I click on Put on Path, you can see that the text is now curved. And when I move this, it moves both of those objects. Now, I'm going to click away, and I'm going to just click on the path, okay? And I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to hit the X in the colors so that the path goes away visually, but stays in my drawing as a path. So even though we can't see it, it is indeed there. Now, I'm going to select this text. I'm going to hold on to Shift on my keyboard, and I'm going to grab onto the corner. I'm adjusting the height with that object selected by clicking on my arrows on my keyboard. It's a very easy way to move your object in just a few pixels at a time. And I'm pretty happy with that. So if I hit 5 on my keyboard, you can see that this now has a more Helvetica style font. I think it's nice. So in the event that you decide to use Inkscape, you should know that you can use Inkscape in order to correct AI images where there are parts of it that you don't like. Like, for example, if I wanted to remove one of these animals, I could do that. It might be easier in a tool like the GNU image manipulation program because it's almost photographic in its nature. But because I knew that I was going to be working in text, Inkscape was the perfect tool for this. It looks like a nice composition. So it's important to know how to save this. So we're going to save this to my folder. I will name it May You Have Peace, Nature. .svg. That's of course useful if I want to continue work on this image. And I'm also going to click on Export, and I'm going to export the entire page. It is placing it in the same place that I put the SVG, which is fine. I'm going to click on Export. Now I'm going to close this dialog. I'll save it one more time for good luck. And there we go. So, In the event that you decide to work with AI, Inkscape can be a part of that workflow. I find it to be a very powerful way to work with AI in order to create great designs, as opposed to completely denouncing AI and thinking it's going to go away. I think that we have to be more realistic than that. Since we have these tools that generate these amazing images, why not use them and make the best of them rather than ignoring them or denouncing them? There's still a place for the designer in this process. I hope you're having a great day. We just recently had Thanksgiving here. I hope that you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope that you are warm. I hope you're well fed. I hope that you are comfortable. If I can help you with Inkscape or graphic design or technology in general, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me at lemazny@gmail.com. I'll see you next week.